at the fall. What was the problem? And we can't deal with what the problem was unless we understand what the ideal should have been. That's what I feel. People have got to think and pray and study what Reverend Moon is teaching, because it's powerful.
I think
it's important.
Yes, I think that you're absolutely convinced that Reverend Moon's rendition of the fall is true. That's, I think, what is in question. Is it true? And then secondly, the remedy to the fall is completely different than Orthodox Christianity. For example, let me ask you a question off of one of his own quotes. There's no sin that Father cannot forgive. This is not his quote. This is a teaching coming out of the 120-day manual,
which is not an official publication of the church.
But you teach it to your missionaries and everybody that comes through at the seminary.
That is one evangelist in the Unification Church sharing a sermon.
So I've got some more here for you.
That's not
let's just finish it up. You don't deny that while you were committing sin, Father was shedding blood to cleanse my sin. Because he shed blood, he was qualified to give life to me. Do you deny that statement?
What do you mean by that statement?
Namely, that Moon was shedding his blood to free people from their sins?
What that meant was that during the time when Reverend Moon began his mission, he went through a tremendous amount of persecution, 3 years of that in a North Korean prison camp. To us, that internment in that prison camp had a very special meaning. When someone says they shed their blood, it doesn't necessarily refer to a physical shedding of blood, but it has to do with an attitude of life. That the whole purpose of life is to live like God, like Jesus, which is selfless. The essence of the fall is selfish love.
Okay.
Therefore, the return to that question of the fall, in answer to Reverend Moon's mission, in my heart and mind, Reverend Moon is showing an example. You can call him the Messiah or not. That's immaterial. The key question is that he's showing an example of selfless love in the individual, family, national, and world level. That is something we've got to look at.
Okay, I have another 1 minute left here. Dr. Martin, come back after this here. Page 16, the Master speaks on prayer in the spirit world. Moon himself said, I have paid a great amount of indemnity, and because of this, I have the right to forgive another's sin. Dr. Martin, concerning the fact of, you got these things that Moon, forgiving sin, his blood being shed, the marriage supper of the Lamb, all of these things that are taking Christian words, it seems like they're being taken out of context, which becomes what we started the program with, what Paul said was another gospel. What would you say concerning these things of forgiving sin and paying a great amount of indemnity? Is he taking Jesus Christ's place?
Well, yes, very definitely, because Jesus Christ made one sacrifice for sin forever and sat down at the right hand of God, and that finished it. What you're seeing here is a direct violation of logical thought. A cannot be non-A. You learn that basically in logic. What we're getting here is a redefinition of terminology so that A ends up non-A. Every time it's pointed out, Mr. Moon denies the Trinity. Mr. Moon denies the deity of Jesus Christ. Mr. Moon denies salvation only by grace for man as a whole entity, that is the spirit as well as the body in the resurrection. Mr. Moon denies the fall, classically, and substitutes for it Eve having sex with Satan, or with Lucifer before he became Satan. He denies the second advent and makes himself the Lord of the second advent. Now, what we're getting is typical cultic changing of terms. The scaling of the language barriers, I said, in the kingdom of the cults, in which, unless you understand what the words mean, you'll never be able to carry on a dialogue or understand what Tom is talking about, because his vocabulary is totally removed from the vocabulary of Christianity. Therefore, when he says that Christianity gave birth to the Unification Church, the Unification Church is an extension of Christianity, can't be an extension of Christianity because it's another gospel and denies Christianity.
10 seconds more. Wrap it up.
That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that the Unification Church is amplifying those terms, that we have to grow into a new view of what those terms mean.
Okay, I'm anxious to see what the audience here would have in terms of questions, and if you'll join us, we're going to start with questions from the audience to this group of men next week. Thank you. Welcome. We're talking about the beliefs of the Unification Church, and we have representatives from Sun Myung's Moon's Church, the Unification Church. First, Thomas Cutts, the Southeast Regional Coordinator for the Unification Church. Reverend Tom McDivitt, Prime Spokesman for the Unification Church, and was help in preparing the video cassettes, the 300,000 video cassettes that were mailed out to thousands of ministers across the United States. Also, we have Jerry Yamamoto, an author concerning the Unification Church, and Dr. Walter Martin, director of the Christian Research Institute. We were talking about what Reverend Moon was saying, that Jesus' mission was here on earth, and that he did not fulfill it. And here's the quote. Jesus knew that God was looking forward to having his only begotten daughter. So Jesus looked forward to restoring a woman to that position. God's ultimate desire is to give a physical bride to his son. How could Jesus kiss an institution? Suppose Jesus had been blessed with a perfect bride. Do you think that because he was a holy man, Jesus should have kept 5 feet away from her at all time? Would he have kissed his bride only for the sake of some sacrifice? Jesus came to fulfill the will of God, and to do so he had to restore his own bride. The entire Christian world is shaken at hearing this revelation, and because of it, Christians have called me a heretic. Let me ask you, Dr. Martin, in being very sensitive to the men that are on the platform right now, because this is very odd for Christians to hear. We have not heard that Jesus missed fulfilling his mission because he didn't get married. And we're not used to hearing that the onward-going process of Christian theology is actually that we need to have a new Messiah that will come, marry, such as Sun Myung Moon did in 1960, start and become the true parents, and actually physically give birth to a new generation that is sinless. Can you comment very gently at that point? And then I'd like to have a response from you, Tom, at that point, too.
I think you have to recognize from biblical theology that Jesus Christ had children, has children, and no wife. And that is found in Isaiah chapter 53. When you will make his life an offering for sin, he will see his children. So we do not have to wait for Jesus to physically kiss a woman. We don't have to wait for Jesus to physically produce a family. We don't have to believe any of that, because in biblical theology, Jesus Christ is the Lord out of heaven, the last Adam, has a glorified body, and is not going to be reproducing children, and already has begotten millions of sons and daughters spiritually by faith. And in the resurrection, uniting physically the spirit and the soul. So the idea that we're getting here from unification theology is a direct opposite on the end of the spectrum from Christianity.
Tom, then we have a member of the Unification Church that wants to ask a question here. Thomas?
I'd like to respond to this.
Yes, please.
From the unification perspective, the God is a God of love, and I think that's Christian perspective. And for the reason God created us was to be able to manifest his love on this earth. And one of the, in fact, Jesus' sacrifice was out of love for us. And we would say that one of the most highest realms of love is between a parent and a child, but then love is even more deeply expressed between the relationship between a man and woman. And so God would want to participate in those relationships as well. And so in the same way, he would want to demonstrate the model of that kind of relationship through his perfect son.
But that's Mormonism, you see.
Well,
because that's exactly what Mormon theology teaches, that God has sexual relations and produces a son.
Well, now, even the whole Bible is, many times uses images of marriage, that our relationship with Jesus should be as marriage.
But not God having sex.
Well, marriage.
Let's go back to the point here that Dr. Martin brought up in the beginning of Jesus having spiritual children. As you probably have read in the principle, we believe that is, when we talk about spiritual salvation, we mean exactly that